I want you to picture something for a second. You walk into a gym, but when you look around, there are no mirrors, there are no treadmills, there's definitely no techno music pumping through the speakers.
Right.
Instead, it is just silence, just an endless, scorching desert.
Yeah.
And the personal trainer, he isn't trying to help you get a six-pack. He is looking you dead in the eye and telling you that your entire definition of what it means to be a rational human being is completely wrong.
It is certainly a rigorous training regimen, but the results, according to the sources we have today, they aren't stronger muscles.
Right.
The goal here is a mind that is effectively bulletproof.
Bulletproof.
Bulletproof to stress, to distraction, and to the absolute chaos of our internal world.
Which honestly sounds like the ultimate superpower for the modern world. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are unpacking what I can only describe as the gym for the soul. We are diving into Volume 1 of the Philokalia.
And before anyone tunes out thinking this is just some, dusty ancient religious textbook, we need to clarify what we are actually looking at. The word Philokalia isn't some scary theological term. It translates to love of beauty.
But we aren't talking about art appreciation or, like, nice sunsets here, are we?
No, not aesthetic beauty in the visual sense. It refers to the love of the beautiful, the good, the ultimate perfection of the human spirit. Think of this less like a rule book and more like the collected field notes from centuries of psychological experiments.
So these are the writings of the Holy Fathers, right? The Desert Fathers.
Exactly. And they're intended to show the source code for purifying, illuminating, and perfecting the human psyche.
It's like the science of the soul, before psychology was even a word. And for this deep dive, we're focusing on two absolute giants from this first volume, St. Anthony the Great and Evagrius Ponticus.
It's a fascinating pairing to start with. You have Anthony, who's the practitioner, the man of action, the pioneer, the first great monk of the desert. And then you have Evagrius, the theoretician, the intellectual, who came along and really systematized the psychology of the mind.
So set the stage for us. We're in the Egyptian desert, roughly the 4th century. Why are these guys running away from civilization? Was it just escapism?
It's easy to think that, but no. They weren't just escaping from the world. They were running toward a battlefield. They retreated to the silence of the desert to confront the giants of sin, as the text puts it.
So the idea is you can't hear the signal if your life is just overwhelmed by noise.
Precisely. The premise is actually quite modern.
It's a sensory deprivation tank. But the session lasts for, like, 40 years.
Essentially. But the scary part about that is when the external noise stops, the internal noise gets incredibly loud. And that is what they went there to fight. They were looking for a way to master their own thoughts.
Okay, let's start with St. Anthony. I was reading his 170 chapters, and he hits you right out of the gate with this definition of rationality that feels, well, it feels backwards.
It completely flips the table on our modern understanding, doesn't it?
Right. Because if I ask someone on the street today, who is a rational person? Share. They're going to say, someone educated, someone who knows science, history.
Someone who's read a lot of books.
Exactly. We equate rationality with data storage, high IQ, PhDs. St. Anthony looks at that and says, absolutely not.
He says it explicitly. Having learned words and books does not make you rational.
So what's his criteria then? If a library card doesn't make you rational, what does?
For Anthony, a rational person is strictly someone who can distinguish good from evil. That's it. That is the only metric.
That seems deceptively simple.
It seems simple until you try to apply it. He argues that the rational soul is one that avoids what's harmful to it and focuses entirely on what's good. He uses surprisingly harsh language here.
He compares people to animals, right?
He does. He says people who can't distinguish good from evil, they differ from beasts only by their physical shape. So if you have a PhD in physics but you can't control your anger, Anthony would say you are functioning on instinct, just like a cow or a wolf. You aren't using the one faculty that makes you truly human.
The moral intellect. That is a high bar. It means being smart doesn't count for anything if your character is a mess.
Precisely. And he connects this rationality directly to gratitude. This is where his physician analogy comes in, and I think this is one of the hardest pills for a modern listener to swallow.
Oh, I struggled with this part. Because it sounds a little bit like masochism.
Well, walk me through your read of it.
He says we thank a doctor who gives us bitter medicine or painful surgery because we want to be physically healthy. So by that logic, we should thank God for our suffering, for our losses. And honestly, when I'm having a terrible week, thank you, is not the first thing on my lips.
That's the natural reaction, of course. But Anthony is pushing us to zoom out. If you accept the premise that the soul is more important than the body, then the health of the soul is the ultimate priority. So Anthony argues that if we were truly rational, we would recognize that hardships are often the chemotherapy for our vices.
So the bad boss, the financial stress, the breakup, those are the bitter pills.
Exactly. To reject the struggle is to reject the cure. He isn't saying pain is fun. He's saying pain is functional. A rational person sees the utility in the suffering.
That reframes the whole concept of being virtuous. I think a lot of us view virtue as, I don't know, extra credit. But Anthony seems to think virtue is actually our baseline, our factory setting.
Yes, this is a crucial point about the nature of being. Anthony teaches that virtues, restraint, endurance, patience are implanted in our nature. We are designed to be good.
So what is evil then, if we're naturally good?
Evil isn't a thing that was created. It's not a substance. Evil is simply an absence. It's what happens when we deviate from our nature. It's a malfunction.
That's interesting. So when I'm being greedy or hateful, I'm not adding something bad to myself. I'm losing a part of my humanity. I'm acting unnaturally.
You're forgetting who you actually are, and this leads directly to his concept of freedom.
Right. We tend to think of freedom as autonomy, the ability to do whatever we want.
And Anthony says, wrong again.
He says, you can be a king ruling over nations and still be a complete slave.
Yeah.
If your soul is dominated by passions, if you are dragged around by anger, lust, or greed, you are in bondage. Your bank account doesn't matter.
That hits hard. True freedom is the mastery of your own impulses. If you can't say no to the second slice of cake, or you can't stop scrolling, you aren't free.
You're being commanded by a desire. Exactly. And speaking of bank accounts, we have to talk about his view on wealth. Anthony calls wealth a temporary illusion.
He uses the luggage analogy, which I loved. It's so practical.
It's a great image, isn't it? He says we shouldn't mourn the loss of money because it's merely stuff we carry for a short time, like a traveler's bag. We can't take it with us.
The only thing you actually own is the virtue of your soul.
That's the only equity that transfers.
Yeah.
Now, there is a theological component here we should clarify, because it ties into this image of an angry God.
Yeah, that if I mess up, God turns his back on me. And Anthony corrects that view beautifully. He says God is good, capital G, passionless and unchangeable. God does not have mood swings. He compares God to the sun.
Okay, so the sun is always shining regardless of what we do on the ground.
Right. The sun doesn't decide to stop shining on you. It's always pouring out light. Anthony says if we are virtuous, we are like clear, healthy eyes that receive that light. But if we are evil, we become like blind eyes.
So the light actually hurts.
Or we simply can't see it. The key takeaway is that God hasn't turned away. We have closed our own shutters. Our sins are the cataracts. We punish ourselves by shutting out the light that is already there.
That is such a hopeful yet terrifying image, because it means I can't blame God for hiding. It's entirely on me to wipe the mud off my own eyes.
It places the responsibility squarely on the individual's inner life. And this focus on the mechanics of the inner life, how to clean those eyes, is the perfect bridge to our second figure, Evagrius Ponticus.
The theoretician. So if Anthony's the coach shouting encouragement, Evagrius is the sports scientist breaking down the biomechanics.
That is a very apt analogy. Evagrius is a skillful diagnoser of the mind. While Anthony gives us these powerful aphorisms, Evagrius provides a system, a step-by-step ladder.
Okay.
He breaks the spiritual life down into two major stages: the active life, or practic, and the contemplative life, or gnostic.
Let's break those down, because active life sounds like, I don't know, building orphanages.
You would think so, but in this context, the active life is all internal. It is the work of purifying the passions. It's the house cleaning. You can't invite a guest, in this case, God, into your home if the house is a mess.
So practicoke is the demolition and cleanup phase.
Yes. It's dealing with your baggage. Only once that's done can you enter the contemplative life, which is the stage of true knowledge and actually seeing God.
He outlines a very specific ladder, right? How do we climb it?
It's a very specific chain. It starts with faith. Faith leads to the fear of God, and by fear, he means a deep reverence. This fear compels you to keep the commandments.
Okay. Step 3. Follow the rules.
Right. But it doesn't stop there. Keeping the commandments leads to the virtues restraint, patience, hope. And here's where it gets really interesting. The goal of all these virtues is to reach a state he calls apatheia.
Apatheia. Now, we have to pause here, because in English, apathy is bad. It means not caring.
It's a massive false friend in translation. For Evagrius, apatheia is the exact opposite of modern apathy. It is a state of supreme spiritual health. It translates to passionlessness.
So does that mean you don't feel love or happiness? You're just a robot.
No, it means you don't suffer from pathological emotions. You aren't a puppet to your reactive impulses. You aren't dragged around by sudden bursts of anger or crippling jealousy. The soul is calm.
Okay, I think I get it.
Think of a heart surgeon. They care deeply about saving the patient, that is, love, but they aren't screaming or panicking. They are steady. That is apatheia.
So it's total emotional regulation. You're unshakable.
Yes. And Evagrius says that this state, apatheia, is the gate that opens to true love. You can't truly love someone if you're constantly jealous or if you need their validation to function. You have to be free of those passions to love purely.
That makes perfect sense. And then, according to the latter, love leads to knowledge or gnosis.
Correct. Natural knowledge, first seeing the creator in the creation, and finally, theology. And for them, theology isn't an academic degree. It is the direct vision of the Holy Trinity.
It's a roadmap. But let's talk about the obstacles. Evagrius is famous for identifying the things that try to knock us off this ladder.
The 8 thoughts. In later centuries, this was adapted into the 7 deadly sins, but it started with Evagrius as the 8 generic thoughts, or demons.
And he called them demons, but it reads remarkably like a psychological diagnosis of intrusive thoughts.
It really does. He lists them. Gluttony, fornication, greed, sadness, anger, acedia.
Acedia, that's the noonday demon, right? The feeling of listlessness.
Yes. It's that heavy, lethargic feeling where you just don't care. It's remarkably similar to modern descriptions of burnout or depression.
And Evagrius describes these not just as sins, but as a war of thoughts.
Exactly. He sees it as a siege. The goal of these thoughts is to fragment the mind, to keep it agitated. Because, and this is the core of his teaching, if the mind is agitated, it cannot pray.
And prayer is the main event here. But not prayer like, oh, God, please help me get this job.
No, that's petition. That is asking for things. For Evagrius, true prayer is much deeper. He defines it as the conversation of the mind with God. But to have this conversation, the mind must be in a specific state. He calls it the naked mind, or gumnos.
The naked mind. Okay, let's unpack that. It sounds vulnerable. What are we stripping off?
We are stripping away concepts, shapes, and images. This is very difficult for us to grasp because we think in pictures. If I say God, you might picture an old man in the clouds or a bright light.
Sure, that's how the brain works.
Evagrius says, stop it. To truly pray and approach the Trinity, you must go beyond imagination.
Why? What's wrong with imagining God?
Because any image you create is a creation. It's a box. It has limits. It is something you made. God is infinite. So if you're focusing on a picture in your head, you aren't focusing on God. You're focusing on an idol you made.
Wow. So the naked mind is a mind that's empty of all that worldly clutter. So it can be filled with the reality of God.
Precisely. He warns that you cannot see the place of God if the mind is filled with thoughts about your bank account or an argument you had. He calls this dust. A resentment acts like a smudge on the lens. You can't see clearly.
It connects right back to St. Anthony's sun analogy. The sun is shining, but if your mind is full of shapes and passions, the shutters are closed.
And this is why the active life, the cleaning of the house, is non-negotiable. You can't jump straight to the vision of God. If you try to enter that deep silence without dealing with your anger first, the silence will just amplify the noise in your head.
That is such a practical warning. We see people trying to meditate today and they get so frustrated because their brain won't shut up.
And Evagrius would say, of course it won't. You haven't trained the virtues yet. You haven't done the pratique.
So let's try to synthesize this. We have St. Anthony, who lays the moral foundation. Be rational, distinguish good from evil.
And realize that the struggle is the cure. Be grateful for the training.
And then Evagrius builds the ladder on top of that. He gives us the system. Fight the 8 thoughts, achieve apatheia, and strip the mind naked so it can actually converse with God.
It creates a complete ecosystem for spiritual growth. It's about a radical transformation of how we perceive reality right now.
And that's what makes this text so timeless. I mean, we are living in the age of distraction. The noise inside our heads is probably louder now than it was in the Egyptian desert.
I would argue it is deafening. We're constantly bombarded, and that's why the concept of hesychia, inner stillness, is more relevant now than ever. These texts offer a strategy for reclaiming ownership of your own mind.
If you're constantly reacting to notifications and headlines, you are, in Anthony's terms, a slave. You are not free. That hits home. The idea that true freedom is the ability to not react, to sit in stillness and just be.
It's the ultimate autonomy, to stand before God or even just to sit with yourself without distraction. It is terrifying, but it is the only path to what they describe as the light of the Trinity.
It is the gym of the soul. And just like a real gym, you don't get fit by watching other people lift weights. You have to do the reps.
And you have to trust the process. As Anthony said, the virtues are natural to us. We aren't trying to become something alien. We are trying to get back to who we were designed to be.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground today. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on, inspired by St. Anthony. We live in a world that prides itself on being rational. We have data, we have science. But if St. Anthony's right, if rationality isn't about what you know, but about how clearly you can distinguish good from evil, are we actually living in a rational age?
It's a question worth asking. And if God really is like the sun always shining, never turning away, what shutters have you personally closed today that are keeping that light out? Is it a grudge, a fear, a desire for something you don't need?
Check your shutters, everyone. Thanks for diving deep with us. We will see you on the next one.